and it will be like the first introduction, a little bit of repetition from yesterday. I just have to move the chat and this window. Okay, so the larger context of what we're doing, you heard until now you heard about systems-oriented design, but there is a bigger field that is called systemic design. And systems-oriented design is like a dialect in that bigger field of systemic design. Systemic design is now organized, it says here is the Systemic Design Research Network, but this has changed. It is now a association registered in Norway, and it's called the Systemic Design Association, SDA. I will share the link. This has become quite a big international network, and we enjoy a lot of exchanges of knowledge, etc., with the conference every year. I will come a little bit back to that later. And we're learning from each other, and we're doing things a little bit different. So systems-oriented design is sort of the Oslo version of it, but it is also adopted other places. For example, in India, as I said, they really relate to what we are doing. This one I already said. It's like I already showed you. It's like a practice-oriented. It's close to practice. It's a practice-oriented approach to the field of systemic design, where others, like for example in Toronto, they work a little bit more towards the theories of design. At Delft, they probably work a little bit more up here towards what is called design thinking, etc. So what is systems thinking? What do you think is systems thinking? Anybody who wants to suggest anything? What is this? What is systems thinking? What is systems? What is a system? Please let me know what you think. Anybody? Okay, I will ask Romeo, what is a system?
For me, like the first thing that comes to mind is like a train of thoughts. If something that has a connection, if it's an action, then what's around the action, what makes it happen, for example.
Yeah, that's cool. Sigrid, you raised your hand.
Yeah, when I think of systems, I think of how you have different things and how they are connected.
Cool. Anybody else wants to say something? No? So I think the term system we use in everyday language, like the system doesn't work, and we say, and then often referring to something like the public system or the political system or so, and not referring to ourselves. We in everyday language we don't think of ourselves so much as systems, but we are also systems. So I think the commonsensical way of using the word system is correct. It's nothing wrong with it. You just have to think that it's more than just something out there. It's also something you are within. You are within a system. You could say everything is part of the system. Systems are everywhere. So to make it explicit, it's I used the example of ecology, the science of ecology or the knowledge field of ecology. It's probably an ultimate example of at least of systems thinking, because ecology needs to be interdisciplinary. Like you need if you look at the barrier at the coral reef, you need to have chemists, zoologists, biologists, people who are specialists on the plants, on ocean streams, on meteorology, etc. So you have to have all those knowledges combined. It's not enough to be an expert anymore. You have to work with other experts, because the systems don't care about our boxes or our silos of expertise. So this is very important for you guys to try to reach out and to find your expert networks and find the people who can help you with understanding these things, like the people from COES today, but also others. And what is typical for such a thing is you cannot isolate it in a laboratory. In a laboratory, typically you would isolate fragments of a system and make experiments to achieve the same result every time you run the experiment. This you cannot do with an ecology because it's too complex. And you, by moving it into a laboratory, you already changed it. And we are part of that ecology. So what are systems theories? Don't bother to read it. It's a really clumsy explanation of what systems theories are. But the point is that you have to know this, at least, that there is something called systems thinking and systems theories. It's huge, it's big, it's a vast field of different theories and different approaches. And to me, I sort of define it as the science of interconnectedness, the science of how things are interconnected and what kind of effects that plays out. But it's quite old. It comes from biology. And if you should remember one name, unfortunately, it's a quite difficult name. It's Ludwig von Bertalanffy. He wrote the first book about general systems theory, which I actually can recommend because it's a good read. So, for example, what such theories can influence. You all have heard about the näringskjeden. What do we call that in English? Well, a chain of a food chain, I think it's called. Næringskjeden is a bit of an old-fashioned way of understanding how species interact. Instead, many people have started to talk about näringsnettverk, food webs. It's not a food chain, but it's a food web. It's interconnected. And this is the food web of the salamander and all the organisms and the chemistry it interacts with. And this is probably a very simplified map, and but it just shows that things are interconnected in ways that are not easy to oversee if we use too simplified models of our systems. So Ludwig, with a different last name, von Bertalanffy, is regarded the father of systems theory, and they made, he and some other people, they made this GST, which is the general systems theory, which is like a theory of everything, which is kind of almost Star Wars or Darth Vader or something. It's like the ultimate truth about everything in one book, which is, of course, it's sort of true because it's a theory that you can use on everything, but it's of course not true. But it's a theory, a way of seeing the world that you can actually apply on everything. But beside that, systems thinking has become common in many different special fields, like in psychology, therapy, military, political science, economy, etc. So if you think about psychology, you all heard about Sigmund Freud, the guy who put you on a couch and then digs down into your dreams to find all your stresses from your childhood, etc. This is not a systems approach to psychology. the new modern psychology, they are preferably using network theory and family theory, which are saying that the problem is not only owned by the individual, it's also caused by the surroundings and the environment of the individual, which makes a lot of sense. And in engineering, you have systems engineering and cybernetics as an engineering approach. I'm a professor too at systems engineering in Kongsberg. In design, there have been a lot of integration of systems thinking in design, but you just haven't heard of it because it's sort of super academic in a way. It never reached out to the practice of mainstream designing before it's happening right now. But people, we already mentioned Buckminster Fuller, and who had this book about the pirates, a very weird one. But
Yeah.
even more, yes? You want to say something, Martin?
No, I was just saying, I was reading that book of the spaceship Earth.
Yeah. Did you make sense of it?
Some of it. I really liked the thought about the great pirates being these individuals who had a lot of knowledge about different areas. They had to be like super intelligent.
It's a little bit elitistic.
Yeah.
Okay. I think some of these people are not so readable anymore, but we will mention Horst Rittel, maybe Russ Acuff, and Bela Banasi is a wonderful guy who worked a lot with education, and Harold Nelson is a guy who wrote the book The Design Way, which is not so easy read, but it's a very good book. Richard Buchanan is one of the most important design theoreticians today. But this has not, systems thinking has not yet made it into mainstream design practice, despite the recognized needs for coping better with systems. So the whole idea of systems-oriented design and the Systemic Design Association is to change this, to make it something that it has the rich repertoire for being used in design. Okay, so this we can already jump. So here are some ideas that come from systems thinkers. Like this one is a quite famous diagram by Stuart Brand, who is a systems thinker and architect, who wrote this book, How Buildings Learn, which is a quite easy book about how our buildings are readapted over time. And he make this pace layer diagram, which says that basically stuff changes faster than the structure of the building. And the skin changes faster than the structure of the building. So the stuff you have in a building that you move around in a daily manner to adapt your environment to your needs is the one that is most dynamic. And then the structure of the building is that least dynamic. So this is moving from looking at the building as a static object to seeing it as a dynamic object that changes over time. Here is another model of you looking at an urban, like a city, urban environment as an entity with a metabolic mechanism. So to say you can look at it as a whole organism that breathes, that takes in materials, that feeds and stores carbon, and that also releases CO2. A lot of the industrial ecologist models are built like that, so they calculate the whole CO2 of a whole city, for example. Again, this is from Varberg in Sweden. So this is not how we do it. So these are very valuable ways of looking at systems and understanding systems, but they are different from the way we work as designers. So this is probably also the reason why systems thinking never really got very popular in design, because former Sigrid is doing exercises. That's nice. Come on, Sigrid, better. That's the good thing with Zoom. We can do all kinds of stuff while listening to lectures. So when you feel to get up, just do it. Okay, like such a model is very difficult to do something for us. We cannot design from that model very easily. So it's not a designerly way to do it. So the models that were tried to implement into design before were sort of disrupting the design process, the thinking, the kind of not intuitive, but practice-based, and the trying and the design thinking. So that's why we think that we are on the right track when it comes to change systems thinking and do it in a different way, do it on the conditions of the designer, not trying to change the way we are designing. So systems-oriented design in systems-oriented design, we look at businesses and organizations almost as entities or creatures or ecologies, creatures that are embedded in ecologies or as ecologies themselves. And sustainability is not only a matter of being green, but also a matter of technology and economy, management, culture, politics, and market. So when we want to change something, for example, change the dropout of youth, we're not looking for one thing to change, but we're looking at the whole ecology, the social ecology of those guys. What causes it? Why does the school not provide the things that trigger them? And there's a very obvious answer that there's too less practical issues that are about changing the practicality of the world, maybe entrepreneurship, etc., from the very beginning. So, for example, understanding the Oslo airport, understanding the interior of the airport as an interface, wayfinding without signs, exploring the space over time. So looking at it not as a fixed machine, but a machine that is dynamic, and that you, in any case, always explore over time. It's not possible to understand or look at this or experience such a space without moving through it. So it's always a time-based experience. And there's spaces for interaction between people, technologies, media, etc. And here, this is from UDI, the Immigration Authorities of Norway, in a project where they redesigned the front end part of the UDI with a user in the center. Now, I have already questioned this, mentioned it about this kind of questioning the user-centered approach. We can go back to that. But I have some small mind switches for you. So when switching to being a systems person, or thinking about systems, or thinking about things in the perspective of systems, think of everything as being super complex. And I try to find the most simple and innocent and stupid object I can find to demonstrate this. A cup of coffee in a paper cup. And if you look at how this paper cup has become just an intersection point of many hyper complex systems, a moment where these systems come together, then it suddenly explodes in complexity. So for example, somebody has to pick the coffee you have in your cup. Maybe there is a lady in Colombia or somewhere, and there's a reason for empathy there. It's like there's people who have brought your coffee to you. It's crosses geographical and cultural distance through very, very complex transportation systems that are fed by by fossil fuels. The paper is somewhere, somebody has cut down a tree in the forest and made paper out of it. And it's processed in very advanced systems of paper industry. In Sweden at the KTH, they have a whole institute for paper. How to make paper watertight is an issue. And it's sold to you, brought to you in brand systems and in trade systems in world trade organizations, etc. So there's a lot of things happening that come together in that paper cup. So I can ask you, what is the political dimension? Is there a political dimension of that paper cup? What are the politics of that paper cup with coffee? Come on, give me some clues.
Well, it's the politics about the trading,
Yeah.
the prices,
Mhm.
yeah, and the various, in all of these different pictures, there's like politics.
Yeah.
In
Right.
which trees you can cut down, and yeah.
So if you start to think about the most simple things in the terms of looking at them as symptoms of very complex processes, there's almost nothing that doesn't have a political dimension to it, which is quite interesting. It's about our societies and about our civil societies, how we interact, how we care for each other, etc. So it crosses not only from understanding material flows like stuff, how coffee as material is transported and you can quantify and measure that, etc. But it's also about culture and about emotions and empathy, such things, and the human ecology of mind, human ecology of mind. So look beyond the object. Try to read your environment as something that is part of very complex systems. And especially now when you think about fossil fuel, how many things are made of fossil fuel in your environment? It's amazing. Your clothes are, your skis are, your paint on your walls is made out of oil, etc. So understanding those connections is probably a precondition for changing things. This looking beyond the object is not only something that is like a task I give you, but it's also quite funny. It will increase your curiosity and interest in the world, and it makes silly things like small paper cups to become very interesting, which is cool. It's like I never thought the paper cup was very, I never bothered about it before I really started to think about it. And it will help you to calculate the consequences of your actions, because whenever you have a design proposal, it will have some causes, it will change something. And sometimes it changes something that you haven't planned. The counterintuitiveness of systems is a well-known phenomenon. So if you try to better something somewhere, you might do other things worse. So this is something you have to be very aware of, the counterintuitiveness of the system. So don't try to fix something and by making something else worse. The other thing is to work with problematiques or problemfelt or problem fields. This means that you look at problems not one-on-one problem, but you look at them as networks of problems. They are interconnected. Maybe they're not even our problems. Maybe they are situations that you want to change. I'm not so sure that defining us as problem solvers is such a good idea, because problems are singular phenomena, singular situations. And we might want to change the root causes of a problem and not the problem directly, you see? So you want maybe to understand what's behind the problem. So this sounds very challenging and very fuzzy in a way, because you don't know what is the problem anymore. It's not like design a new coffee cup or a new coffee grinder, but it's very much more open. We don't know what the problem is. But the good thing is that we have abilities as systems thinkers. Amongst them is we are used to engage in fuzzy and ill-defined problems, because for all the things we work with, there is no correct or wrong answer. If somebody asks you to design a new coffee machine, there's no one single faucet or one single solution that is correct and all others are wrong, like in mathematics. But there's only solutions that are better or worse. And you know you have to sort of find a way through that. Even if it's a small issue, a small problem, it's still kind of fluffy, and you have to make a way through it, not only based on pure reasoning and calculations, but in an intuitive and holistic way. This leads us to Horst Rittel, who I mentioned. Have you all heard about wicked problems before? Yes, does some say no, some say a little bit. Yes, okay. So wicked problems are quite important in the design field, discussed a lot. They are introduced by Horst Rittel, who was a design professor at the Ulm School of Design. So this comes from the heart of design. Here are the 10 wicked problems of Rittel and Weber, his colleague. And the wicked problem is a complex problem where there is you don't know exactly what to do with it before you have developed a solution and found out that it doesn't work. And then you can maybe try the next one and try out if that works better, etc. So there is no definitive formulation of a wicked problem. You cannot say from starting with the wicked problem that formulate the problem. That's not possible, because you don't know it before you have, let's say, resolved it in some way or the other. Wicked problems have no stopping rule, so you don't know when you actually are finished with this task. Solution, I already said, to wicked problems are not true or false, but good or bad. There is no immediate and no ultimate test of a solution to a wicked problem. Every solution to a wicked problem is a one-shot operation. So because there is no opportunity to learn by trial and error, every attempt counts significantly. This is, you can discuss, you don't have to buy this uncritically. But this is based on that while you do the first try on a system change, let's say bringing kids back to school, and this fails, but you have made an impact on the system already. And while you're planning, the system is anyway changing. So you don't know if your second impact is actually hitting the target. So in a way, every wicked problem is unique. It's embedded in a situation and in a time that tomorrow it's a different one. I will not go through the rest, but anyway, this is quite an interesting way and important way for us to think, to understand how systems operate, because systems don't wait for us to be finished with our planning. They change while we plan, definitely. Another really cool force superpower of the designer is the ability to visualize and do this in process, as a process tool, like here, where you sit around something and discuss it and move it around and try to figure out things, but also for communication with other people, trying to communicate complex issues with people who are not necessarily inside that process. This is called information visualization, which is a whole field by its own, based on graphic design, but mostly based on simplification. And this is, of course, also connected to this wonderful superpower called visual thinking, so that you are using illustrations to communicate and to think and to understand things, to interpret how things work. And this is actually at the core of what we do with the Gigamapping. However, still the designers' ability to think in complex systems needs to be trained and developed further. So the good news here is that you need to train. You don't need to be very, very scholarly good in reading all the books about systems that you can come over. It's more important that you train your ability to practice as a systems-oriented designer. This is the core of it. But this doesn't make things easier because it takes some time to train. So if you read the book and you want to, you read a book about jumping on ski, there are many theories about it and a lot of research and wind tunnel experiments, etc. And you read all the books and you go to Holmenkollen and you stand on the top and you want to jump. I don't think that's such a good idea. I think you need to start in a small jump and feel it in your body and embody that knowledge. So your bodily intelligence is activated. There is not so much bodily intelligence in the practice of designing, but there's a lot of visual intelligence there. It's the same. So when you think these processes are cumbersome and slow in the start, they go so much faster when you are really trained. When I was young and was learning to design, we were focused on designing the perfect design object, like the single object. I was trained at SOKS across the school, which is now the art school. And we were thinking that we should never compromise. We should never, we should only do what is right from our perspective and what is the perfect chair in my case, because I was doing furniture design. And from the chair will be perfect from internal logics, like nicely composed, etc., and nice materials. And we could actually stretch as far as saying it should be good to sit in. so we involved some anonymous stakeholder with a anonymous type of ergonomics. Today we think of this totally differently. We think that we are negotiating. We're not compromising, but we are negotiating. We talk to people. We do something for people. We want to do something. We want to help young people to stay in school, for example, this type of problems, a wicked problem. And we know that designers can help with this. Designers can, point one, help to understand the problem through visual thinking, through Gigamapping. Point two, find places where there can be change and understand what kind of impact that change might have, and induce, implement operations for change. So Gigamapping is our central tool because of this theme of visual thinking. So they are extensive, multi-scholar, mixed, inclusive, genre-breaking, unorthodox, creative, messy, myriadic visualizations of fields, problems, issues, subjects, environments, things, and social constructs in the world. So, ta-ta, you can do whatever you want, as long as you try to integrate things on your map. You try to see how they are connected. Try to find different ways of expressions, different types of data. Not shy away from hard data, from statistics, etc., but bring it in. Don't shy away from talking to people. Bring in their perspectives, etc. So this is actually what this type of map is about. And it's a process of designing by making it into visual exercise, a visual practice. It's actually a design process in its own. So we start with some kind of handmade sketches that this looks beautiful, but it's also messy, and and don't think about it in the same way as if you would design something other, like the coffee machine. You would start with some quick and dirty sketches and have some ideas. And this is pretty the same. And you have to redraw and reorganize and etc. So here's some, this I showed before. And the messiness of it. And here they also used threads to emphasize the main connections, but there's myriads of small connections. And this kind of richness, to have this kind of a lot of elements in play, is a value in itself. It's like interesting. It's the value of richness. Richness sort of reflects the complexity of the systems much better than if you would simplify it. Remember the funnel and the tunnel I showed yesterday. For example, this is from India. The guys, they were decoding empathy. And I just looked at it for 5 minutes and I learned a lot, because I haven't thought about this, that empathy, what is it really? It's both a biological thing, it's a social thing, it's a cultural thing, and it has all these aspects. Such work is just opening up the boxes so much, and it's a wonderful experience to get this kind of learning. So this is probably the first takeaway for you. It's a learning process. You will learn things about a lot of things that you were taken for given, and that you start to unpack, and you start to learn a lot about it. It's a rapid learning process. Here another one. So a point of the Gigamapping is that it should mix and interrelate all kinds of information and different modes of presentation of data, info, and knowledge. The mixing and relating of different channels and ways of representing info is crucial. So the exact thing that the Gigamapping is without any kind of strict rules is also the whole idea, that you have to actually, there's this rule, you have to break those rules, you have to break those genres, you have to bring together the information. And also one thing is to look at how is the information presented. By changing how it is presented, you might reread and reinterpret that information and understand it differently. This is from Chalmers, from the School of Architecture in Göteborg. So I'd said this already before, that it's like training as a skill. It's almost also embodiment, like, you know, tacit knowledge, Tauskunskap. Is that, are you familiar with that? Did you learn about this guy already? Tauskunskap. Okay, it's about making explicit knowledge, like this phenomena when the ski jumper has read all the books and trained for a long time, he forgets all the knowledge because everything is embodied, you see, and only then he can fly. This is Tauskunskap. It's the same with these design processes, and learning design is that you embody a lot of this knowledge that you learn, and this becomes tacit knowledge. But also the other way, that Gigamap helps you to make tacit knowledge explicit, and that is what happens in the first stage when you start to map later today. Yeah, okay, and you train sensibility for systems, and you will do sense making and sense sharing. I will come back to this a little bit later, but I will we are now at the end of this lecture, even if I would like to say more, but I will just flip through this types of gigamaps. I will share this, of course, and you can go through it on your own. I just want to end with this, with like this notion of scenario thinking. The whole course is about creating scenarios for the future of rural Norway in 20 years. So you have to use scenario thinking. You have to tell a story, create a scenario, and communicate it. So this is very cool because scenario thinking is also about fantasy. So in your systems working with these systems and systems-oriented design, it's also a creative process. It's not just understanding and describing the system, but while you're understanding and describe the system and draw your arrows, you said, oh, what if these two things would be connected? They are not, but they should really talk to each other. How many times did you think have this thought? They should really talk to each other. It happens all the time. And then that's when you step from describing a system to designing it, to change it, to induce new opportunities, to find magnificent innovations because they are systemic, they have ripple effect, they have impact over time, etc. So if you have ideas very early, somebody told you perhaps to hold on with ideas, I would say don't just draw them as sketches into your maps, but don't get stuck to them, but have them there as ways of looking at the system and creating what if questions. What if we did this? Probably not a good idea, but it helps you to learn more aspects of the system. So I will stop this now and stop the recording.